Since I came into crypto in 2017, new innovation has made it much easier to manage our different crypto holdings. Now, it was very difficult back then in 2017 for me to imagine how crypto could be, where it could be easy for someone to get in crypto and not be overwhelmed with all that you need to know to trade and own crypto. Today, that future is much closer to where my grandma could come in and buy some crypto and reasonably be able to get around, but we're still not there. One of the big problems that was in the way was that every different layer one blockchain was like its own silo, independent and separate from the rest, programmed in its own programming language and structured very differently. So you couldn't easily send funds from one chain to the next. In fact, it was impossible. Today, that problem is mostly solved. Wanchain's decentralized bridges just added Solana, and you can now bridge funds between most major chains that most of us use in a simple and cost-effective way. Joining us to talk about the future of crypto is Temujin Louie, CEO of Wanchain, which has been a big part of connecting up all these different chains. Tim, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, it's great to be back on the channel. Really looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, I remember back in 2017, all these different silos. I remember a new project that was launching talking about making things cross-chain compatible. I couldn't really wrap my mind around what that even looked like. I remember we didn't even have MetaMask in those days. We had a MyEther wallet, which, oh my gosh, was such a pain to use. And I was thinking, I can't see a day where ETH can connect up to Bitcoin or to anything else, much less envision what they were talking about, but it sounded good. I was like, oh, Wanchain is going to make things cross-chain compatible. What does that mean? I don't know what that looks like. But for those that are, say, haven't seen Wanchain before, what is Wanchain doing? Like, what is the vision? What does cross-chain compatible even mean?
Yeah, well, that was a great intro you gave. So that's really what blockchain interoperability is all about, right? It's about you have these different siloed blockchains, and you have the data that's just kind of stuck on one chain. It has no awareness that any other chains even exist. And so what interoperability does is allow these different blockchains to essentially operate as one kind of meta network, let's call it. So that was the kind of vision that Wanchain had from the start, in the sense that because Bitcoin and Ethereum already existed, that kind of already sealed the deal that not everything's going to run on a single blockchain. So we knew from that point there was going to be multiple blockchains. And so if ever blockchain was going to reach this kind of mainstream adoption, it would have to have some mechanism for it to transact with one another, to be able to both access, write, and read the data from a different chain. And so that's blockchain interoperability in a nutshell. But Wanchain is really the not only the longest running blockchain interoperability protocol, but the first one. So I think a lot of your audience probably has heard of us, but we're responsible for a few milestones along the way. We had the first just cross-chain bridge launched all the way back in 2018. This was an industry first. We also launched the first Ethereum to Bitcoin, was also an industry first. And so we've had these milestones along the way. But as you said, sometimes, it looks like interoperability is still a little janky, but when you compare it to those earliest days where there was even no MetaMask, we really have come a long way.
Yeah, it's amazing that so much, like I use Wanchain's bridge all the time to send stablecoins from one side to the other, like across different chains. It makes it so easy. And I remember when bridges even first came around, they were scary as hell. I would send funds, and like 8 hours later, I was checking to see if it had gone across. When Wanchain completed their bridge and like started bridging to all these networks, it made my life so much easier. And recently, big milestone, you added Solana to your whole network. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that. That was probably, because each of these silos has different programming languages, different things that they use. Tell us about the Solana bridge.
Sure. Yeah, that obviously is a big milestone for us as well. Solana is obviously very popular. And as you mentioned, it's a non-EVM. If we zoom out a little bit, you can imperfectly, but you can kind of get away with categorizing all blockchains as EVM or non-EVM. So if you're EVM, it's a lot of Ethereum forks, it's the L2s. When you're developing the protocols on these, it's not quite copy paste, but there's a lot of overlap, since they're all just running an EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine. Then you have this kind of second category. This is things like Solana, like Sway, like Cardano, which are non-EVM. So these have just totally different infrastructures, different programming languages. Some of them might not even have smart contracts. So it's just a whole different world. So integrating these and making them speak to other blockchains is a much larger task. But if you look at kind of, not everything's about market cap, but if you do look at the top 20 market cap or so, you'd be stunned to see that, like, I think even more than half of the top 20 projects are non-EVM based. So, it's not something that we think can be ignored. We think it's a real big shame if interoperability just becomes only EVM to EVM, and that's just the way the industry goes. It would be easier, but I think we'd lose a lot, because when you have these different types of blockchains, these different structures, they're really well suited for different types of use cases. So as we kind of start onboarding more of the real world, they'll be able to select the blockchain that best suits their needs. And even beyond that, they could break up their own offering and, process parts of their product stack on one blockchain, parts of another one on a different blockchain, depending on the different kind of attributes that they're looking for. And so, this has really been something that has been ingrained in Wanchain from the start, is to not ignore these non-EVMs. We had the major success with the kind of first Bitcoin bridge, so directly from Bitcoin to different blockchains. We more recently had huge success with Cardano. So now we're basically the only decentralized bridge servicing Cardano right now, again, because it is more difficult to deploy to. You probably remember from a few years ago, we did get a bit of buzz with our XRP Ledger integration, as well as Litecoin for a little bit. And so now the kind of next major non-EVM pillar that we just launched, as you mentioned, is Solana. Here we support basically two assets right now. It just launched about a week ago. And so Solana is lucky enough to have native USDT and USDC. These are great blue chip assets that the industry trusts. It can be quite difficult, though, to move these assets, particularly USDT, from a chain like Solana to another chain. You can't really use the official Tether platform unless there's a variety of restrictions. I think the minimum transaction size is $100,000, and you need to be totally KYC'd, and it's a whole kind of Web 2 process. If you're just a regular user, you got $1,000. You want to bring it over to Polygon or something like that. Wanchain Bridge makes that very easy, especially now with our new Solana integration.
So when I often think about the future of crypto, and one of the things I realized back in 2017, I was like, this is so difficult. How does it get to the place where we get complete adoption from everyone? Think about how easy the internet is for, say, my grandma. She gets on an iPad and she really doesn't know anything. She doesn't know about what the different protocols are, but she can go to a website and use it. And that's what got internet pushed out to everyone. Mm-hmm. I think as crypto, I'm really seeing that come together, right? So Wanchain has allowed you to send funds between these different chains. I can envision a future where people don't even realize what chains they're interacting on. They can just be like, oh, I want this, and get it. In one of our previous conversations, we talked about what Wanchain is developing to be able to go from one chain, buy an NFT on another chain, and not really understand that they bought it on another chain, or not have to think about it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's like the next step in things coming to the future, where you could just have a wallet and you don't have to think about, oh, that NFT is on Cardano, I want it, or oh, that NFT is on Solana, I want it. Mm-hmm. Share with me what Wanchain's been working on with that, because when you shared that, I was like, oh my gosh, this vision came together of how you could literally just have one wallet, but be able to buy things on whatever chain. And when you talked about Wanchain doing that, I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, well, good memory. It has been a few months since we spoke, but basically this world that you described, while we're not there yet, this is basically the vision that Wanchain has for the future. We want a future where the whole world basically is running on a unified, decentralized network of blockchains. There's a few missing pieces still today to make this possible. We're working here very hard in kind of establishing industry-wide standards. As you know, Wanchain's very involved in the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. Our CTO, our Dr. Weijia Zhang, he's the head of interoperability at the EEA. And just a few weeks ago, we officially published the full version 1.0 of the interoperability spec. So this is another big milestone on that path. But to kind of go directly to what you're talking about, we did develop almost like a proof of concept to show what is possible with interoperability, wherein a user could sign a transaction just on their MetaMask on any EVM chain that they want. Doesn't matter what chain, Ethereum, Avalanche, Polygon, what have you. And then work a little bit of interoperability magic. And in the background, the funds are being sent to a chain like Cardano, automatically triggering all the on-chain logic to purchase an NFT, for example, on Cardano once again, and then taking that NFT, bridging it back to the EVM chain where it can reside in the user's EVM wallet. So from the user's perspective, they just signed one transaction in the wallet that they are basically already used to. And especially it's great for something like an NFT where a lot of people are just focused on kind of the art aspect of NFTs. And so it really doesn't matter what chain it's on. If you want to support a particular artist, okay, maybe they minted on Cardano, and this is just an easy way to kind of expose that to the kind of whole blockchain space, rather than just being limited to to the community of the chain you happen to mint on originally.
I want to ask you, since we have you here, and I know one of the people on your team, Dr. Ouija, is really involved in creating these interoperability specs. Where do you see the future of crypto going over the next 4 years? What would you see, like what innovations are being worked on that might come about in that time frame?
Yeah, I think when 4 years, sometimes it sounds like a short time frame. Sometimes it sounds like a long time frame. When you do look back 4 years and the progress we've made on interoperability in those 4 years, it's really quite impressive. And so if we give ourselves another 4 years, I think we're going to continue along that path, just making it more seamless, making it easier, making the types of use cases, a little more robust, maybe more than just transferring value from one chain to another, maybe break out of just DeFi applications. I think what I'm specifically looking forward to is right now, while, as you said, projects like Wanchain, and we're not the only one, but projects like Wanchain, these interoperability protocols are pretty good now at moving assets from one chain to another. We also have a cross-chain message passing protocol, which is basically moving types of data from one chain to another chain. And so this is getting relatively seamless, especially if you're not a beginner to blockchain. But with having these kind of competing interoperability protocols, all just kind of making things up on the spot. It's been that type of industry. Things move fast, a lot of innovation. These interoperability protocols, we've kind of gerrymandered the blockchain space. So, the original vision is to make all these different siloed chains speak to one another. But we ended up creating a world where it actually does matter which bridge you decided to use to connect these two chains. And if you bridged from another chain, from another bridge, it's incompatible with another user who bridged with a different bridge, if you know what I'm trying to say. So it really kind of mattered. Each bridge kind of became its own siloed product. And so this is the kind of pain point that I'm really looking forward to solving over the coming years. This requires something like the interoperability standards that Dr. Zhang is working on. It also requires probably the involvement of enterprise and potentially even government, because if we're talking about bringing the whole world on chain, it involves them as well. And that's also why Wanchain, maybe you saw the headlines, but a few weeks ago, Wanchain was one of several projects who were founding members of the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust. So this is kind of another pipeline wherein these standards that we're developing in the Web3 space, in organizations like the EEA, can then infiltrate other institutions like the LFDT, where they can go and kind of become open source products who can then spread, into wider industry.
It's funny how in the early days of the internet, like I remember being involved in these conversations and the standards going on to make it so seamless. And as those standards came about, it became seamless. And so Wanchain is on the forefront of setting those standards, right? Because if you do, the bridging technology out there is so different, and sometimes it creates a mess to try to be entangled when assets are sent from one chain to another. Mm-hmm. And so as these standards come about, it'll make what Wanchain's doing a lot easier, but also like bridges will get easier.
Yeah, and importantly, it also makes it easier. Sorry to interrupt, but I think it's an important point that it'll also make it easier to vet the security of different bridges and different interoperability solutions. I think we alluded to it at the start of the conversation. There has been, not with Wanchain, but with other protocols, there have been hacks. And, this has been a topic that has been discussed endlessly and has even, I would say, given a kind of black eye to the industry as a whole, even beyond bridges, just because of like the sticker shock, of how much money kind of gets lost in these types of hacks. And it's a bad look for everyone. So when you do have these common standards, it makes it more possible for not only end users, but also projects, enterprises, even governments to kind of vet the security of each protocol, because they're all kind of openly abiding by a standard. And this is particularly important because, we talk in blockchain a lot about, everything's on chain, everything is transparent. With bridges, there's an off-chain component. So we also kind of need standards to make sure that this part is being handled properly. Because, the whole reason why interoperability solutions exist is because one blockchain simply does not know that another blockchain exists, has no access to that data. So you do have this off-chain component, that has to come in and help transport this information and this data from one chain to a different chain. And this kind of off-chain component can be decentralized as well, like it is in Wanchain, very decentralized. We use like that, this well, but a permissionless set of nodes that get reelected on a monthly basis. These bridge nodes, this is not on, if we're doing Ethereum to Bitcoin, these are not Ethereum nodes. These are not Bitcoin nodes. So you can consider them as an off-chain component. But, it's kind of very difficult to tell if you're a new user who's not kind of a power user of a particular bridge, or if you're just trying a different bridge, to kind of figure out how are they handling all this stuff, because there are no standards, because all these projects that just decided to build it the way they decided to build it, they're not necessarily all targeting maximum security. They might be targeting maximum speed. They might be targeting scalability. They might be targeting any number of things, low cost. But because you have projects where everyone's just basically building products, but because they're not all focused on maximum security all the time, which is probably what kind of core infrastructure interoperability needs to be, you end up with a lot of kind of poorly designed or just not as secure as they should be protocols, and then you get these types of hacks.
Yeah, I know a lot of the centralized bridges, I've seen a lot of problems with them getting hacked and funds going down, right? So a lot of projects that I've been involved with investing early stage, they have like a BNB chain, and they also have it on ETH, and their bridge for their token is frequently a target of the hack. So they can get like the funds that have been escrowed. Wanchain, I like the way that you guys set it up. It's very different than what a lot of the other bridges did, and kind of pioneered a way. One of the other things I like is I don't like staking in like Uniswap pools where you stake two assets. Wanchain set it up so you can stake just one asset in the pool used for the bridge in that setup. Like, I like that kind of setup. Say I want to hold Wanchain, or I want to hold something else. I just want exposure to that one, and be able to stake it and earn extra is like a bonus. Yeah, that's pretty deep in the weeds as far as the infrastructure of how they set it up for people that don't like to get deep in the weeds. But I really like the technology behind how they set up their bridges and the decentralization behind it. We are live, so we have some comments in here. Cloud Macro jumps in. I love Wanchain project. I love Tem and Team Wanchain. Pete D asks a question. Hi, Tem. Is the Wanchain trustless Bitcoin bridge different than the BTC OS bridge that is being developed using ZK tech to bridge Bitcoin to Cardano?
Yeah, so definitely it would be different. So I think the interesting part of BTC OS is the kind of zero knowledge proof verification on blockchain, on Bitcoin. In all interoperability, I think we've all been slowly moving towards some sort of zero knowledge implementation. There's huge advantages to that. Basically, let me start with Wanchain. The way Wanchain's Bitcoin bridge works is, so on Bitcoin, the user will essentially lock the Bitcoin in an address on Bitcoin. And then we have the Wanchain bridge nodes. This is that permissionless set of nodes that gets reelected. They will detect that the user has locked the Bitcoin on Bitcoin. And then generate, if 17, our threshold is 17 out of 25. So if at least 17 of these nodes agree that this is a legal event that happened on Bitcoin, then they'll trigger the action on the destination chain. It could be, for example, then minting the wrapped Bitcoin on Cardano or on Ethereum or on any of the chains that we support. With something like the ZK implementation of a BTC OS, you don't need this kind of voting mechanism from an MPC or a multi-sig in some other bridges, or a centralized actor in some other bridges. So for us, it's MPC. Rather, you can actually generate you can like set up a proof server, generate a ZK knowledge proof, and then you can verify it on chain. So this is something that's really cool. Now, there's kind of big downsides in terms of just usability. Generating zero knowledge proofs is very compute intensive. If you're trying to do it with just like a regular computer, you can almost kind of forget about it. And then we say we probably don't want to get too much into the weeds, but yes, it is different. I think the way it's going to go is, if this Bitcoin, if this BTC OS kind of zero knowledge proof, and we are researching it right now because it was recently made a big announcement with Cardano. The way it kind of provides value, I think, for us is all kind of legitimate bridges are looking at zero knowledge implementations already. The reason why they haven't kind of spread is because there's major downsides. These downsides seem to also exist with the BTC OS, but they are going to be part of the long-term solution for interoperability. And so we're keeping an eye on it. And for a project like Wanchain, you probably want some sort of hybrid solution that implements zero knowledge proof while also kind of taking some of the advantages of different types of approaches such as MPC.
A good answer. Let's see. Abe says, Chris, catching up with one of the other people in the chat. Everyone's going to be yelling Wanchain, Wanchain, Wanchain. I'll be the guy with the Wanchain license plate. Cloud Macro, in my opinion, Wanchain should work a little more on marketing to be seen more. That's frequently a problem I hear with most projects during the bear market, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, spend money on marketing. And it's like marketing in a bear market doesn't get you much traction. Just a tiny bit of awareness.
Yeah, but our marketing is, an important part of any project. We have from a few months ago, a new marketing manager joined the team. So I think he's starting to do some good work. And you're seeing, I think we get that comment less than we used to, particularly in the past several months. We didn't really talk about it yet, but we made some kind of realignment of our products. We're trying to kind of unify the whole system. Before we had the layer 1 blockchain, we had the bridge, we had the R&D side of things, and they weren't always super well connected. So now we've done a much better job of kind of merging all of these things, unifying all of these things so that they're all kind of creating value for one another. We kind of really tied it together with our convert and burn system. So basically, right now, as people use the bridge, there's some fees that are collected. These fees will get and converted into the Wanchain, and then it gets distributed to a variety of different pools, like a community treasury, some stuff to sustain the node operators, and then a portion of it is also burned. So ever since I think that has launched, the community has been in pretty good spirits, I would say.
Yeah, that burn mechanism that was recently implemented is a big deal. I know a lot of crypto users love that because then the token becomes deflationary over time.
Yeah, exactly. And a project like Wanchain, who's been around so long, we're reaching our max supply. Technically we'll never reach it, but we'll get increasingly close to, infinitely close to it, because our emissions kind of reduce on a year-by-year basis. So yeah, I think for the community, they like to see, at least from when they look at the design of the project, if they can see this path forward, it's clear how it's supposed to work, and the path to get there is also very obvious.
Yeah, it's good that now some of those fees get collected and go to the node operators, right? Because they have to have their rewards, and his emissions have gone down.
That's right.
It just makes it sustainable for the future, as well as implementing a burn, which is cool.
Yeah, everyone likes a burn.
All right, Web Zombies says, ask about the message passing protocol.
Sure, yeah. So clearly WebZombie pays close attention to Wanchain. So we have the WAN bridge, the Wanchain bridge, and as we've been talking about, it's to move assets, from one chain to another primarily. Lots of different assets on lots of different chains. But when you kind of zoom out again, an asset in the blockchain world is just like a very specific data structure. Frankly, most of the use cases that exist on blockchain right now are to move value around, DeFi applications, things like that. But since it's just moving one data structure around, then you can abstract it out a little bit more, get to kind of a deeper level. So with a message passing protocol, rather than passing this one particular data structure, which is like a value asset, you can pass just data messages from one chain to another. And then what that kind of enables is that developers can create applications that span multiple chains, so long as there are smart contracts, really. So, for example, they could send they could, the tricky part is, the most of the implementation of these end up being something like a cross-chain swap. So they could, for example, swap an asset on a DEX and then bridge that asset to another chain and then swap it to yet another asset on the second chain. And that intermediary step is done by the message passing protocol. Or you could just, pass kind of tangential information, such as instructions of what to do when you get to the destination chain, or various kind of address information, really kind of anything you can fit in as a message on chain. And then the receiving smart contract can then use that information to move the transaction along and trigger further logic. So that was like a way too complicated way of basically just saying that a message passing protocol will just let one smart contract trigger another smart contract on another chain, basically. We've been working on this for a little while. It will be released very, very soon, so you guys can all look forward to seeing that. And with Wanchains, not only does it abide, totally compliant with the EEA standard that we've talked about for interoperability, but also it relies on the same group of nodes that have been securing the Wanchain bridge for all of these years. So you can also feel pretty confident in the security of the cross-chain component.
Yeah. We got Justin joining us here, King Claw joining us, Chris Ashby with another question. Will Wanchain be bridging RLUSD from the XRP ledger to the Wanchain ecosystem once it is more widely available?
We certainly could. I don't know if we have like very specific plans to do so yet, but definitely if it ends up becoming a so-called blue chip stablecoin, then definitely, moving stablecoins across different chains right now is kind of one of the major use cases for blockchain as a whole right now, in terms of the kind of when you analyze the data. So if that stablecoin does become something that is widely used and that there's demand for it in other chains, then absolutely. We have found, though, the way the kind of stablecoin industry is going is that if your stablecoin only exists on one chain, it limits its appeal, especially considering you have these giants like Circle and Tether, who not only do they have billions of dollars in this stablecoin, but it's spread across, dozens of chains. When your stablecoin just like exists on only one chain, then when a bridge brings it to another chain, the user ends up with a wrapped version of it. And there's pros and cons to having a wrapped asset. But usually when it comes to stablecoins, users prefer to hold the real thing, the native version that's minted by the actual company that backs it. And so probably you would want to see this this stablecoin, this RLUSD, I think was the ticker. If that exists natively on multiple chains, then the kind of value proposition of making it bridgeable, it becomes clearer.
So I'm having some difficulties with my camera, which has been kept timing out. For some reason, they updated the Canon software behind it. And so I have to keep refreshing it or it would time out and just freeze up. And it just started doing this last week. So that's why my camera now went off. And it wants me to reboot the whole thing in order for it to come back on.
No worries. We'll talk to the logo.
Thank you, Canon. Appreciate your update very much. So crypto, like we've been in this long bear market, and many think that 2025 will be pretty positive for crypto. What are you seeing on your end? Do you see more things coming together? So 2025 might be a crazy bull run year.
One would certainly hope so. As I think we were casually talking about before the camera went on, definitely it's been an extended bear, let's say. And so the amount of new people that join the ecosystem obviously lowers, compared to, um, when it's a quote unquote bull. I think for this time, what I'm really hoping to see is I want kind of a real use case that blows up that is not DeFi. When DeFi first emerged, it really did wonders for all of blockchain, and it really kind of increased the usability of blockchain as a whole. But in the kind of years that have passed since that original kind of DeFi fueled run, we had the NFT thing momentarily, but that didn't really last a very long time. We'd kind of if I had the answer of what the next thing would be, maybe I'd go out and do it. But I'm really looking forward to what that new use case is actually going to be and what's going to fuel it. If we just kind of get stuck in DeFi, I think it really kind of limits the usability of blockchain as a whole. And as we mentioned at the many times on this talk, our vision is that we do have this wide decentralized network that the whole world can run on. But if it's just always boils down to moving quote unquote money around or trading, blockchain's still going to survive and it's still going to do great because its advantages to like the financial industry is very, very obvious. But I want to see something more, and I want to see something that can inspire once again, like that first DeFi run. And I'll just keep chiming in here, especially if I'm taking it solely from a cross-chain interoperability perspective. In the past year or so, especially from a marketing point of view, we've seen projects kind of pivot away from bridges because it's kind of become a poison pill term with all the hacks, and more into these message passing protocols and this type of wording. But then when people start building with it, the vast majority of the implementations that actually get used just results in like cross-chain swaps, just cross-chain versions of what we were already doing on a single chain. So basically just kind of becomes more DeFi implementations, which are good and great. Wanchain ourselves will be expanding our actual in-house product offering as well. So this is not the kind of hate on these types of projects, but they're more iterative improvements rather than the kind of next revolution. So definitely what I'm hoping to see in 2025 is that next revolution.
Yeah, it's funny how crypto has this 4-year cycle, and about every 4 years, Bitcoin's price goes higher, which gets massive awareness coming to crypto, and then it booms, and then it slows back down, and it's in the bear market where I feel like most of the work is actually done. And then once every 4 years, everyone pays attention again, and that we're looking probably 2025 that will happen, and people will be like, oh my gosh. Some people go to sleep, they come into crypto for a year while all the action's there, and then they go to sleep. But when they come back, they're going to see that it's evolved and gone a lot farther, and it's easier to use than ever. And like the bridging technology that I use today on Wanchain to send funds across, like I remember 2 years ago, it was so much more complex with other bridges. And 3 years ago, it was barely brand new. And 4 years ago, I don't know that it really existed. So it's fun to me to see this future evolving into something where grandma can actually use it.
Yeah, I mean, my grandma's maybe not alive enough to use it, but if she was, yeah, I think maybe she would still struggle with it. So we still have ways to go to improve just usability and UX, definitely. So I think without a doubt that will happen in 2025. That has just been happening over the years, as you said. Just look back a few years versus now, and sometimes we forget to pause and look back and actually appreciate the progress that we have made, because it really is night and day compared to those early days.
Yeah, and imagine, like, I remember the early days of the internet and how, like, 10 years later was so much better, and 20 years later, like, it's a world of change. And the same thing will happen with crypto. Like 10 years from now, we'll probably have one wallet or maybe two wallets that we use, and we won't have to think about what chain anything is on
Hmm.
because it will just be accessible. And projects like Wanchain will connect up the bridges behind the scenes so that it becomes seamless.
Hmm. And then hopefully we can stop calling it wallets and kind of start thinking about blockchain as more than just money. Maybe we'll all just call them accounts at that point.
You're probably right. And that would be relative to what everyone knows, right? When it becomes so simple, people don't have to think about the technology that's behind it. Much as like the internet today, we don't think about anymore. Like, we don't even think about HTTP. We don't
Right.
think about like all the different protocols going on in the back. We just get on a website,
Hmm.
and we use it. Or our phone connects up, we install a little app on our phone these days, and then we run it from the app on our phone, and we just think about the app. We don't think about any of the other stuff.
Yeah. So we still have a ways to go, but like we said, we've made incredible progress.
All right. One last question before we wrap up. Chris Ashbay asks, are there any plans to bridge crypto assets to outside of the crypto space, like for instance, a debit card or bank account?
So that would definitely be useful. The problem is once you enter that kind of Web 2 world, then it's not up to you anymore. Even in the kind of Web 2.5 world, it's really not up to us. We always tell users not to bridge directly to us, even just like a centralized exchange. And that's not because there's like a technical limitation to doing it. It's really just because once you're off chain, you're just dealing with policies. So there are certain centralized exchanges that, this is just an example, but there are certain centralized exchanges that don't allow deposits via smart contracts. So if you're using a bridge, a decentralized bridge, it's going to be via smart contract in most chains. And so then the user will lose their money, or maybe if not fully lose it, then they'll have to enter the kind of file a ticket and get some customer service. And we all know how kind of big of a pain that is. So the pain would probably be an order of magnitude higher if you try to do it directly to a bank. So but I think there's a larger point here that is important, is that we often, at least in our circles, when we talk about interoperability, without saying it, we're actually only talking about interoperability between public networks, public blockchains, the true decentralized pieces of our industry. But we do have to consider interoperability between public blockchains and private blockchains, particularly if we want to kind of bring on kind of enterprise use cases. And then we also kind of at a more conceptual level do have to think about interoperability between blockchain and legacy systems, whether it's financial like banks, what rails exist already today, because we can create something that is very beautiful and decentralized and works well as its own self-contained thing. But the fact of the matter is, the world already exists. We're not starting from a totally blank sheet of paper. And so there will need to be ways to both preserve and interact with legacy systems if we have this vision that blockchain becomes ubiquitous and the world runs on blockchain.
Yeah, that was a great question, Chris. And really, is it fair to say it's because banks haven't been working on making their systems compatible with public blockchains right now? And that at some point, if they did, that would be the holdup. But for now, they haven't really had the incentives to do that.
Well, banks have been one of the earliest movers in blockchains. Sometimes we, in the public sphere, we are hesitant about attracting, on one hand, enterprises, but particularly governments. But enterprises, have been early innovators in the industry. It's just not something that is particularly relevant to retail users, so it doesn't get talked about a lot. So there has been and continues to be major research and case studies, even focused specifically on interoperability, that are happening in these kind of private spheres. In the earlier days, we did see a trend where these various enterprises, they all want to launch their own private network because, they're used to being in control, controlling their data, owning their data. So you kind of asking them to just give up that power, give up the control, it's a big ask. But then you kind of ended up in a position where, all these different enterprises were all running their own chains. And so, they discovered that all of their business partners are not, for the same reason that they're not willing to use a public chain or someone else's chain, their own business partners are not willing to use their chain. So it didn't kind of really go anywhere. Then there was, more experiments or research, whatever you want to call it, done into, okay, which parts of this can we put on a public chain? Because some data might not be as sensitive. We can keep our very sensitive data on a blockchain that we ourselves control, the centralized piece, and then we can put less sensitive stuff either on a public chain or like a federated chain with multiple participants that are just me and my business partners have access to this data, and kind of these types of implementations. So this is all happening behind the scenes. It's been happening for years. Wanchain participates actively in kind of these types of experiments as well. Very recently, we've done stuff with kind of like a Stellar to Polygon type of implementation. Again, totally compliant with the EA standards. So these are just kind of very, very ongoing things. But again, I think a lot of the bottleneck on this type of stuff is the interoperability problem, because enterprises, they're talking billions of dollars, and they're very risk averse, and they should be. And so if there's not clear regulation, if there's not high confidence in the security of the systems, they're just going to continue to do experiments, but it's never actually going to progress past that. And it's very, very, very difficult, if not impossible, to get clear regulations if things are as they are now and everyone is just building their own products, not following any type of guidelines or best practices. And so all of this needs to be cleaned up, get some standards in place, or at least a few competing standards. And then, it becomes more viable for both regulators and enterprises to kind of make the jump fully.
I really enjoyed this chat talking about the future of like crypto and how crypto integrates more into our lives and what challenges there are to coming together. It sounds like a lot of it is the standards being laid out, being agreed on, and then everyone starts working with those standards. And yeah, it's fun to think about where this might be 4 years from now. But I know I have a little bit of a hard time seeing where it's going to be 4 years from now. Just like in 2017, when I was reading about Wanchain, in early 2018, it's like, oh, they're going to make it cross-chain compatible. Like, what does that even mean? But now I can see like the bridge makes it so easy for me to send stablecoins across all these different networks, which is awesome, because oftentimes I'll be trading in alts that are be like isolated on some chain, like BNB's chain. And say I want to move those funds to somewhere else, I can just liquidate them on an exchange there. I can send the stablecoin off to whatever, whether I need on Cardano or I need on some other network, now Solana, as a stablecoin, and then I can transact on a decentralized exchange there and easily get whatever asset I need, which is cool. Like, that used to be really difficult. And Wanchain, gosh, it's so fast these days, and I don't have to worry so much about fees and holding. Anyway, it takes care of all that for me. I enjoy it a lot.
Yes, well, we appreciate your support, and definitely it's only going to keep getting better. We're adding new chains all the time. We're always actively working on integrating more non-EVMs. EVMs themselves we're also adding as well. And, a lot of the L2s we already support. So as these kind of become new ones pop up all the time, these are easy integrations. And then also, things like Wanchain or Sway, these type of chains that are starting to pick up some steam. These are good targets for Wanchain to integrate.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us, Tim. Tim has agreed to stay on a few minutes for a private chat with the Rainmakers. So I will send you a new link to that. And if you're in our private Discord, look for the link there and you can jump in, ask more questions. Thanks so much, Tim.
Great. Thanks a lot.